Have you ever stopped to wonder how one man could possibly lead the world into such a horrific abyss, and yet never act alone? Let's step inside Hitler's most private spaces. Who are the individuals closest to him, and what sort of existence did they lead while the world around them was consumed by the flames of history? Our journey begins in a place that seems on the surface remarkably serene. The Berghof, Hitler's secluded mountain retreat nestled in Bavaria. Picture this. A scene straight off a postcard, mist gently weaving through the dense pine forest, a tranquil lake shimmering in the distance. However, behind this facade of tranquility lay the informal nerve center of the entire Nazi empire. Here, Hitler wasn't just the imposing dictator delivering speeches from a podium. He was a host, the gravitational force around which every gaze and conversation revolved. The inner circle was small, exceptionally so, and it was precisely this intimacy that made it so incredibly dangerous. There was Martin Bormann, the icily efficient secretary. He wasn't a frontline commander, nor a public figure commanding attention. Yet, he wielded the most profound kind of power, access to Hitler himself. Bormann decided who gained entry, who was left waiting, who was blocked entirely, and whose voice was ultimately heard. He moved silently through the Berghof with a notebook always in hand, a shadowy presence shaping critical decisions before they ever saw the light of day. Beside him stood Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda, his voice as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. During intimate evenings fueled by wine, Goebbels would lean in close to Hitler, whispering of national will, of the glorious future that awaited them. His influence extended far beyond swaying crowds. He skillfully manipulated an entire empire with his carefully chosen words, and at times, even managed to lull himself into believing his own carefully constructed narrative. Then came Hermann Göring, once a celebrated flying ace of World War I, now the regime's flamboyant, self-proclaimed prince. Göring's entrances were always theatrical events. Uniforms laden with medals, the overpowering scent of expensive cologne, and the unmistakable swagger of a man convinced of his inherent right to rule. At the Berghof, he laughed boisterously, spoke with unparalleled volume, and boasted without restraint. But beneath this carefully constructed spectacle resided a deep-seated fear of being forgotten, a fear that grew as the war took a turn for the worse, and Hitler's trust in him began to wane. And of course, there was Heinrich Himmler, the SS chief, soft-spoken, with eyes as cold as glacial ice and unerringly modest in demeanor. Himmler had no need for showmanship or grand gestures. He instead focused on building a kingdom within a kingdom. The SS, the Gestapo, and the vast, horrifying network of concentration camps. When he entered a room, the very air seemed to thin, crackling with tension. He embodied the raw, unadulterated power of fear. But Hitler's inner circle wasn't exclusively composed of men in uniform. There was also Eva Braun, a woman living a life of carefully polished secrecy. In official records, she barely registered as a blip. Yet within the walls of the Berghof, Eva was the one selecting the films to be screened, capturing moments with her camera, laughing, and desperately trying to create an atmosphere of normality. She had a fondness for beautiful dresses, music, and idyllic picnics. And perhaps above all else, she cherished being close to the epicenter of power, even as that center began to crumble and collapse around her. Eva existed within a bubble, a brutal war raging outside, while a fragile illusion of domesticity persisted inside. The most chilling aspect wasn't the fact that they openly discussed brutal plans. It was how they managed to transform such unimaginable brutality into something utterly routine. A typical morning at the Berghof might unfold like this. Hitler enjoys a vegetarian meal, sips tea, and engages in conversation about architecture or perhaps his beloved dogs. At a nearby table, Bormann casually murmurs about train schedules for upcoming deportations. Himmler provides a matter-of-fact update on how many problems have been solved. Goebbels suggests a catchy new slogan for the propaganda machine. All of this is delivered calmly, as if they were simply discussing the weather. A machinery of death meticulously orchestrated between the clinking of forks. Hitler was known for his lengthy monologues. He would pace back and forth across the room, clutching a pencil or pointer in his hand, his voice rising and falling with dramatic effect. The men surrounding him didn't dare to argue. They simply nodded in agreement. This wasn't always out of genuine belief, but rather out of a clear understanding. Power within this circle meant keeping Hitler satisfied, ensuring you remain close to him, and keeping your rivals at a safe distance. Consequently, the inner circle was rife with intense rivalry. Göring and Himmler constantly vied for influence. Bormann skillfully erected invisible walls around Hitler, leaving high-ranking generals frustrated and powerless. Goebbels relentlessly attempted to become the voice inside Hitler's head. Everyone desperately wanted to be the last person whispering in Hitler's ear before he made a decision, and sometimes that single whisper had the power to redirect an entire military front. However, as the war edged closer to its inevitable conclusion, their world gradually shrank into a dimly lit room. By 1943 and 1944, the Berghof had been bombed, forcing Hitler to retreat into the confines of the Berlin bunker. His inner circle tightened like planets spiraling toward a black hole. The once confident voices began to tremble with uncertainty. The promise of a 1,000-year Reich dissolved into ripped maps and desperate, blind hope. Inside the bunker, the same disturbing scene played out repeatedly. Hitler ranted and raved. Bormann diligently took notes. Goebbels vehemently insisted on no surrender. Himmler secretly sought avenues for negotiation and then ultimately fled. Göring sent a message requesting to take over leadership, only to be branded a traitor by Hitler. The once glowing inner circle shattered under the weight of suspicion and despair. In those final desperate days, they were no longer symbols of power. They were simply human beings trapped by the consequences of the choices they had made. Some chose to end their own lives. Some attempted to flee. Others were captured and brought to justice. History concluded not with triumphant fanfare, but with the cold, definitive slam of a steel door. If this exploration has brought history closer to you and made it feel more human, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support enables me to continue delving into the hidden rooms of power, where ambition, fear, and blind obedience propel the world so deeply into darkness. But one crucial question remains. Following Hitler's death, how did the individuals from that inner circle manage to disappear? And who was successful in rewriting their narrative first?